Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY, and today's episode we're going to be taking the supercharger off again and we're going to be ditching the EFI system. So, stay tuned. Today's episode is brought to you by you. That's right. Every single episode created on Classic Mini DIY is made with the help of our patrons and our long-term parts sponsor, 7 Mini Parts. If you want to see more mini stuff and more videos in the future, please consider supporting the channel on patreon.com/Classic Mini DIY, or by checking out some of my awesome merch like t-shirts, stickers, and all sorts of other really cool stuff at merch.classicminidiy.com. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Now, as I said, we are going to be ditching the fuel injection system on my supercharger. Now, a lot of you will probably be wondering, why on earth would I be ditching the fuel injection system when I spent so much time getting it set up and working properly for my car? Well, there are quite a few things that I haven't shown on videos because I've been constantly dealing with issues with the Sniper EFI specifically. I have touched a little bit here and there on some of the issues that I've run into, things with the ECU, things with the idle air control valve, and the list goes on and on and on. I've had sensors fail, I've had displays fail, I've had issues with the power, I've had issues with it completely losing the map. And honestly, I am just totally fed up and done with the Sniper EFI. I have followed the directions to the letter in terms of how much power it needs and how to wire it up and how to run everything, yet it's been nothing but issues. Now, I do want to stress the fact that the issues I'm having with the Sniper setup are not indicative of issues related to a supercharged setup. It's really specifically to the induction system I'm using. If I could go back and do this all over again, I would definitely go for a full setup for a full fuel injection system with a trigger wheel, with a separate ECU, with some dual throttle bodies, something like that. Although it is a bit more work in the beginning, I think that it would have yielded much better results. Now, let's pop the hood off, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm going to be replacing it with, as well as some of the reasons that I'm not going for a full fuel injection setup in replacement of this EFI that I have on here now. Now, we sure have looked at this EFI setup quite a lot over the last few months, haven't we? But the issue that finally broke the camel's back was the air fuel sensor actually failed. And then I replaced the air fuel sensor, and it's still not working. And the ECU is doing a piss poor job of keeping the fueling system correct and keeping the mixture correct, which is the whole purpose of having an ECU here. We've swapped the tune on this, we've remapped it, and it's still doing the same thing. So what I'm going to be doing is removing this whole supercharger and replacing it with the DCOE Weber style intake system. I already have a Dizzy down here, so there's not any sort of fuss that I have to manage with a trigger wheel and the crank position sensor, all that stuff. There's nothing there that I need to really fuss with. Now, unfortunately for me though, these superchargers are built to suit the type of induction system that you're using. So you can see here, this flange that this Sniper connects up to, this flange is set up for the Holley EFI systems, or really Holley carburetor flanges. The Weber DCOE setups have a different flange style, so that it's not a direct just swap this off and put a Weber on. Now, I've said tons and tons of good things about Stuart over the time of building this here, but I do want to stress how wonderful he's been with this whole issue that I've been having. I've been talking with him about, what should I do? How do I fix this? And what he's going to do for me, I'm going to send this supercharger back to him, and then he's going to send me another supercharger back out, same color, but with the DCOE flange on it. This is going to go to someone else who might want to try the Sniper setup and will probably have a lot better success than I have with it. And so I'll do a direct swap out, plus a little bit of extra money because the carb does cost some money. And he's going to send that back to me, and then we'll hook all that stuff up here. Now, some of you might be asking, why am I not just using an ECU and, getting some throttle bodies for this that happen to mount up to this flange or do some sort of adapter plate, something like that? The reason I'm not doing that is because, one, it's going to cost me a lot more money to implement that. And then two, this setup is actually largely and more closely relates to a carburetor system. I don't have a separate ECU, that lives inside the throttle body here. I don't have any sort of trigger wheel on my pulley down there, and I don't really want to take any of that apart down there in order to implement one. And I already have a Dizzy down here. So, easiest thing, slap a Weber on there. We'll get that in tune. They work great, and it'll be a little bit more true to form on this car since this was a carbureted engine initially. That's probably enough talk for you guys. I think that you have a good idea of why I'm doing this now. So let's take the supercharger off, and then I'm gonna let you guys time warp and jump ahead to when I get the supercharger back, and I'll show you guys how to put on a supercharger with a Weber on it. So that's gonna be some fun. So let's go ahead and take this off in 3, 2, 1. Now, while we wait for that supercharger to come back from Stuart, I was so graciously offered a Weber 45 from one of my patrons, Michael Rennick. I want to say a huge, huge thank you to him. This saved me a good bit of money in terms of buying a new carburetor and everything, and it came with the whole linkage and everything that sits on top of this Weber. Now, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to use all of this with the supercharged setup. But in order to get this to work and operate for the supercharger in the most ideal way, we do have to change out a few of the things inside it. Now, I do want to just stress the fact that I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, a Weber expert. In fact, I've never even touched one of these before. This is my first time with a Weber carb in person and working on it myself. But I want to shout out a channel that I watch around Weber carburetors. It's actually an Alfa Romeo channel from a guy in South Africa. His name's Jethro Bronner, and he does some really, really incredible work. He's a smart guy, and I am using most of his videos for my kind of reference guide for this Weber here. So this is not going to be like an instructional, this is how you take apart a Weber and do it properly. This is going to be Cole is fumbling around and taking this stuff apart and learning as he goes. Now I do have some specs for this Weber provided to me from Stuart, and that relates to some of the internal parts that I need to replace on this. I'm working with him to make sure that I get the right parts, and this is suited for the air-fuel mixture I need on the supercharger. Now, enough talking. Let's start taking this stuff apart and seeing what it looks like. I think what we'll have to start off with here is the linkage on the side here and on the top. This linkage is actually made by a different company called Mangoleti. I'm not really sure if that is correct. It's in cursive and I think that's right. But yeah, let's take that off first. Okay, so there we have it, the full kit of the Weber carburetor all taken apart. These parts, I don't know what most of them are, but it all came apart pretty easily. I think that if you're doing this, you're just going to want to take your time and don't force anything. Just slowly take things apart and try and keep them together where they came off. Because genuinely, there are a ton of small parts for this Weber. I mean, you can see that most of these little tiny parts are made out of brass and just really, really, really intricate little pieces. It's really cool, but it's probably easy to lose or misplace things like this. All right, so now that this stuff is out of here, I think it's time to send it through the parts washer. Now, there are a few different ways I could clean this. I could bring it to a glass blasting place and get the aluminum casings glass blasted, and then, you know, clean up all of these other little parts with my sonic cleaner. I think what I'm gonna try is doing the sonic cleaner for everything first, and then if the aluminum casings don't get clean enough or to my liking, then I can come back through and bring this somewhere to have them kind of clean it up at that extra level. But I think it's gonna tidy up pretty nicely, and it'll get all the kind of just surface grime off of here. This really isn't that dirty, so should be pretty good. There are so many little parts on this thing, but it is super, super cool. Honestly, seeing all of this out here like this now, I'm actually more excited about this Weber than I was about the fuel injection system. There's just something so cool about all of these parts working in harmony to, you know, deliver fuel and air to your engine. So I'm gonna get these clean. I'm gonna jump ahead. You guys don't need to see all that process. But if you're interested in the parts washer that I use in this episode, it is linked in the description below. It's an affiliate link. So if you buy something, it'll help the channel. So anyway, let's get this clean. I'll see you on the other side. All right, so we have a mostly assembled Weber carburetor. I am pretty excited. I've got all the internals kind of replaced for the supercharger for the most part. A lot of this external linkage, I'm not totally certain if I'm going to be able to use it, so fingers crossed. It depends on if it all can clear the hood on the car. With the supercharger in place and everything, it can kind of get a little bit tight in there. But I am really excited with how all of this turned out. Now, if you guys have really in-depth questions about the Weber carburetors, I'm probably not going to be able to help you out. I did get a kind of a better understanding of how this stuff works, so if you want to ask the questions here, feel free to do so. But I would really encourage you guys that if you have a Weber and you're looking for some in-depth information about how they work, that you check out Bronner on YouTube. He's got some really, really great videos. I use them almost the whole way through my build just to make sure I was doing things correctly, even though my carburetor was a little bit different than the one in his video. Now, unfortunately, because I've run out of some of the parts and I need some parts for the throttle spindles and stuff like that, I'm not going to be able to finish this in this episode. So this is going to go to a 2-part episode. We will cap it off here in terms of the swap over to the Weber on the supercharger build here. And on part 2, I'll cover a little bit more about the remaining parts that I haven't put on the Weber. And then we will install the new supercharger once it gets here and install the Weber and see if we can get it started. So that should be pretty fun, and I hope you guys come back and enjoy that episode with me. So until then, and until I see you guys again, enjoy those minis and motor on.